Okay, so we're going to take a look at section 81. But in order to make the best of this, you need to have the context from section 80 in mind. Cicero finished section 80 by saying, "In quo primum incredibilem stupiditatem hominis cognoscite," in which matter, first of all, recognise the incredible stupidity of the man. What is Cicero talking about here? Well, he's saying this with reference to Antony declaring that he is going to impede Dolabella's election by way of the auspices. This passage is going to get a little bit technical. There are some points of procedure which will come out here, but the basic thrust is that Cicero thinks Antony is an idiot because he doesn't understand the powers that he himself has. So what's the problem? Antony is an augur. He does have powers to call on the auspices, to observe the auspices during political proceedings, and as you may know, the political process in Rome was to some extent dictated by whether the omens were good, the signs from the gods were good, and in Antony's case we're talking about the flights of birds. If there's some strange flight of birds which suggests to Antony that the omens for whatever political procedure is happening, in this case an election, are not good, then he can say so and it will nullify the whole process. But Cicero is drawing on the technicalities to show us that Antony is in fact a bit of a dunderhead. So he's finished the last section, look at his incredible stupidity, and then quid enim, a question, just a kind of linking question really to start us off. Quid enim, for what? For what does he mean? For what do you mean? For what is this? It's quite elliptical, it's quite short. You just need to view it as a question which links through from his previous statement that Antony is an idiot into his explanation of why he's an idiot. So he says, "Istud, quod te sacerdoti jure facere posse dixisti." Istud is the accusative here, but we'll start with that because I think it works here. Istud, that thing, i.e. the impeding of Dolabella's election, that thing, and then the relative clause to describe what that is. Quod te sacerdoti jure facere posse dixisti, that thing, quod dixisti, which you said, and then an accusative and infinitive will follow from that. That you, and the infinitive actually here to start with is posse. You said you were able, and then that's got another infinitive following on for it, facere, to do. Jure is in the ablative and means something like with the right, with the authority. And then sacerdoti, which follows on from it, is dative with the right to a priest, i.e. with the right of a priest, with the authority of a priest is probably more straightforward in English. So that thing which you said you were able to do with a priest's authority. See augur known essays, if you were not an augur. So we've got this conditional clause coming in here. Et consul essays, and you were a consul. Both of those verbs are in the subjunctive, giving us introducing the condition. So if you were not an augur and you were a consul, you might want to take et as but, just to give it a little bit more strength in English. It's an unusual thing to do, but I think that's the point. He's creating a contrast here. If you weren't this and you were this, the point really is that Antony is both, but we'll get onto that in just a moment. If you were not an augur and you were a consul, minus facere potuisses, would you have been able? So this is the other side of the conditional clause. Potuisses is in the pluperfect subjunctive. Would you have been able, facere, to do, no object with that, but you need to imply the act of obstructing Dolabella's election. So just it would be fine. Would you have been able, facere, to do it minus, less, or maybe in English, any the less? The answer to that question is no. An augur had the power to observe auspices, but actually the consul's power is greater, and Cicero is going to explain that in just a moment, which he does. The point which he's trying to make, though, is that Antony has drawn on the wrong powers, maybe because he doesn't understand them, or there may be a deeper reason as well, which I'll come on to in a minute. He says, "Vide, ne etiam facilius." Vide is obviously just the imperative from video, look. Ne etiam facilius. Again, this is quite compressed. So ne etiam facilius. Look, no, you would have been able to, wouldn't you have been able to do it more easily? Yeah, is the sense of it. But there's no verb there to finish that off. So etiam facilius, even more easily, nay, and then you need to imply some sort of verb there. Wouldn't it have been even easier? Look, you may not even want to put the negative in there at all. Look, it would have been even easier. And his explanation is as follows: Nos enim nuntiationem solum habemus. For we, nos enim nuntiationem solum habemus, we have habemus nuntiationem solum, only the power to announce. Nuntiationem is just the announcement, declaration, but here it means the power to announce, and specifically in relation to the auspices as well. For we have the power only to announce. Cicero is including himself in that because he too is an augur, so has these powers as well. Consules et reliqui magistratus etiam spectionem. Consuls and reliqui magistratus, the remaining magistrates, the other magistrates, etiam also. You need to imply the habemus again, or it would be habent because Cicero is not part of that group. But you need to imply the same verb again. Consuls and the remaining magistrates have etiam spectionem, even the power to observe. And that means sort of active observation, really. And that's the distinction that he's trying to make. That as an augur, if you're at a political meeting or some event, and something happens which looks like it's a bad omen, then you have the right to declare that. Consuls and magistrates, however, can declare that they are going to look for omens before any sort of meeting or event starts. There's an element of politeness here because it's kind of recognised in the ancient world that if some magistrate declares that they will actively observe the omens before any sort of meeting starts, then probably hardly anyone will turn up to that meeting, because they know that any magistrate who declares that is looking for an excuse to actively impede whatever event is going to happen. But Antony doesn't do that here, and he doesn't do that because he's not calling on his powers as a consul. He has already, however, said previously that he will do it, but he's not done it in an official capacity, and that's where the mismatch is coming. That he's got both sets of powers. He chooses to use his powers as an augur, which means that he can't say beforehand he's going to look for them, because it should just be a matter of seeing something and declaring it. But he is definitely doing the latter. He's going to an event with the anticipation that he will look for bad omens and then will announce them. So that's where the problem comes. Cicero then kind of throws that away, having thrown it up in the air for everybody to see. He wants to move on from that. It's probably had its impact. So he says, esto, hoc imperite. Esto is a third person imperative. It's quite a rare form. It means something like let it be, so be it. Hoc imperite, again, is quite compressed. There's no verb to go with that. You need a verb there. You said this, hoc dixisti, or you did this, hoc facisti, imperite, unknowingly, ignorantly. Something that is peritus is skilled, so imperitus is unskilled, i.e. you don't understand. You did this not knowing, unknowingly, ignorantly. It could also be passive, actually. You could have hoc factum est. This was done ignorantly, out of ignorance. But whatever the case may be, he's missed the verb out, so we can't know what's supposed to be there. So you just have to put something in that will work. So be it. You did this out of ignorance. Nec enim est ab homine numquam sobrio postulanda prudentia. Never want to miss a chance to get a dig in at Antony. Cicero draws on one of his consistent themes throughout his attacks on Antony, and that's the idea that Antony is always drunk. Nec enim est ab homine numquam sobrio postulanda prudentia. Nec enim est, for it is not. Well, what is not? The subject here is actually left right at the very end, the prudentia. Prudence, good sense, is not. And then agreeing with that, you've got this gerundive next to it, postulanda. For good sense is not to be demanded. That's not a terribly elegant way of expressing it in English. So you might want to turn that around and say something like, one should not demand good sense, or you should not demand good sense if you wished. Anyway, either way, for good sense is not to be demanded ab homine, from a man, numquam sobrio, who is never sober. Literally just from a man never sober. But you might want to fill that out just a little bit. Good sense is not to be demanded from a man who is never sober. And as I say, that's a common theme with Cicero. Any opportunity to paint Antony as a drunken yob, and he will take it. Sed videte impudentiam, but look at his shamelessness. This is going to lead into another discussion again. He's going to explain what his shamelessness is. The videte signals a change of focus as well, though, which is worth noticing, in that it's plural, so it's referring to the Senate. You, senators, look at his shamelessness. Obviously, in reality, it didn't, because this speech was never actually made in front of the Senate. Multis ante mensibus in senatu dixit se dolobellae comitia aut prohibiturum auspicis aut id facturum esse quod fecit. So it starts with a time phrase, multis ante mensibus, many months before. In senatu dixit, in the Senate, he said, and then that instantly leads into an accusative and infinitive style construction. He said, say, that he. The infinitive comes in two parts, prohibiturum here, which is just the future participle, and then facturum esse, which is obviously the participle with the esse. So you can imply the esse down here as well. So many months before, he said in the Senate that he prohibiturum, or in this case aut prohibiturum, either would prohibit, and then the object of that is the comitia which comes in front, the election Dolobellae of Dolabella. Comitia is actually the assembly itself, the meeting which is going to elect Dolabella, but it's probably easier just to translate it as the election in this instance. So many months before, he said in the Senate that he would either prohibit the election of Dolabella auspices, through the auspices, by the use of the auspices, out, or, so second option, facturum esse, and you need to imply the say again with this, or that he would do this thing, and then the explanation of that, quod fecit, which he did. That's a little bit unclear. It refers to, rather than blocking off the assembly before it started, the thing that Antony actually did was to draw on the auspices at the point of Dolabella's election. So those are your two choices. He said many months before that either he would prohibit the election or that he would use the auspices during the election, and that's what quod fecit refers to, that thing which he actually did. Quisquamne divinare potest, quid vitii in auspicis futurum sit, nisi qui de caelo sovare constituit. And this really gives the crux of the matter, that Antony has used a power in the wrong way, and Cicero explains that. Quisquam, just anybody, but the ne on the end turns it into a question. It's just the question suffix. Okay. So is anyone divinare potest, able to foretell? Quid vitii. Vitii is in the genitive, it's a partitive genitive, so it's just easier in English to say what impediment, literally what of impediment, but just what impediment. Is anyone able to foretell what impediment in auspicies futurum sit? What impediment futurum sit will be in auspices, in the auspices. Futurum sit, sit is obviously subjunctive with the future participle. It's periphrastic subjunctive, future subjunctive, so is literally what impediment is going to be in the auspices. But is anyone able to foretell what impediment will be in the auspices? Nisi, qui, except the man who. Okay, so this is our problem. Cicero is pulling us in the direction of, well, Antony is not somebody who just happens to have seen something in the auspices, because it's clear from what he said before, many months before in the Senate, that he is going to see something. So except a man who de caelo sovare constituit, except a man who constituit has decided. Sovare is usually used to save, to keep, to look after. But here, in terms of the auspices, it means to give heed to or to pay heed to. So except a man who has decided to pay heed, de caelo, concerning the sky. So except a man who's decided to watch the sky, basically. And that's the camp that he's putting Antony in. He's already decided before this meeting, but in using his powers as an augur, that's not something which he has power to do. And the fact that he has these powers as a consul but decides not to draw on those is where Cicero is making out that he just is playing at being a politician, really. He doesn't know what he's doing. Quod neque licet committees per leges, et si qui sovavit non committees habitis, sed prius quam habeantur debet nuntiare. And this is what he's about to explain here. Yeah. So can any man foretell what he's going to see unless he's already decided to do it? Quod neque licet, which thing, i.e. the act of deciding beforehand that you're going to do it, which thing is not allowed committees per leges in the assembly, per leges, literally through the laws, but by law is probably fine. This thing isn't allowed in an assembly through the law. Committees is ablative because it's of time, so during an assembly would be better, maybe. So this is not allowed, this is not permitted during assembly by law. And si qui servavit, if anyone has observed them, you get this nice ablative absolute here, non committees habitis, not with the assembly having been held, so i.e. not after the assembly, said prius quam habeantur, but before it is held, debet nuntiare, he ought to announce it. Okay, so you can't just wait until the end of the meeting and say, well, that's duff because I saw this. It's not good enough to see that. You can't just sit and wait and see how things turn out and then decide at the end that you're going to nullify it. You need to mention it earlier than that. Again, it's quite procedure, it's quite heavy, but I hope that's clear. Verum implicata inscientia impudentia est, nexcit quod augurem nec facit quod pudentem decet. So he closes this section just by insulting Antony again, because he doesn't understand what's going on, really doesn't understand his own powers. Verum implicata inscientia impudentia est. So verum here just but, in truth, it's just linking, so but implicata inscientia impudentia est. Implicata inscientia impudentia. One of those, either inscientia or impudentia is the subject. I'm going to take impudentia as the subject because it's got est next to it. So impudentia, his shamelessness, est implicata, is entangled, is tied up with, and so that would make inscientia the ablative. His shamelessness is tied up with his inscientia, his lack of knowledge. I quite like the ambiguity of the phrase when it's written down, because it just means that it's all a sort of entwined mess. It doesn't really matter which way around you read it, whether it's his lack of knowledge is entwined with his shamelessness, or his shamelessness is entwined with his lack of knowledge. It doesn't really matter. Either way, it works. What does he mean by that? He's just as shameless as he is stupid, basically. The two things go hand in hand together. And he's going to elaborate on that just to finish the section here. Next skit. And he does not know quod augurem nec facit quod pudentem decet. He does not know quod augurem, that which an augur, and then you need a verb with that, so I'm going to leap to this decet at the end. What an augur ought. So he doesn't understand his role as an augur, and he does not know what an augur ought. Nec facit, and he does not do quod pudentem decet. And he doesn't behave, he does not do what a pudentem, a modest man, should. He doesn't do what a modest man should. So he doesn't understand his role as an augur, and he doesn't behave like a good, honest, modest Roman citizen would. He's a shameless man. So there's a lot of procedure there, a lot of things tied up in the practicalities of what it means to be an augur versus what it means to be a consul, and how those two things work in terms of looking at the sky for auguries. But I hope that makes sense.